Marjorie McCown is my guest today on the WriterSpark Podcast. She spent 30 years in costume design in Hollywood, working on major motion pictures like The Curious Case of Benjamin Button, X-Men Days of Future Past, Hairspray, Apollo 13, The Aviator, so many amazing films that she was part of. It's just fascinating to get behind the scenes sort of information, a sneak peek, or a look behind the curtain at what life is really like when filming a movie. Hello. I'm Melissa Bourbon, and this is the WriterSpark Podcast, where business, creativity, and the craft of writing converge. Welcome. 15 years ago, I was an avid reader, but not a writer. I didn't know anything about the actual craft, and I knew next to nothing about the publishing industry. But I had a dream to become a published author, and I set out to learn everything I could. Now, I'm a #1 Amazon and national best-selling author of more than 35 novels. I've published traditionally, and I recently plunged into the world of indie publishing. And I teach people like you how to grow in their craft and find success in this ever-changing industry. I'm an ordinary person, a wife, a mom, a daughter, a teacher, living in a small North Carolina town. Through WriterSpark, I am doing what I love more than anything in the world, which is teaching and helping others on their writing journeys. I'm here as your partner as you navigate your own writing journey. I'm here to help you understand the essential elements of the writing craft, to build your confidence, and to help you find the success you desire. Welcome to the WriterSpark Podcast. I am here today with Marjorie McCown, who is the author of Final Cut, which is the first in a new series, The Hollywood Mysteries. I had the pleasure of meeting and listening to Marjorie at Flyleaf Books in Chapel Hill when she was out here a couple of months ago, and I get a signed copy, which is so nice. I'm so happy to welcome you to the WriterSpark Podcast, Marjorie. Thank you for being here.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's an honor to be here and talk to you.
So as you know, we've talked about it a little bit. The WriterSpark Podcast is geared greatly towards aspiring writers, new writers, and writers who want to kind of learn or get re-inspired with elements of craft, as we talk about all kinds of different things. So we're going to be talking about how you took your kind of real life and turned it into this fictional world. So I want to start just by hearing a little bit about your path to publishing, kind of your origin story. So how did you transition from your world as a costume designer in Hollywood, which is so fascinating, to being a murder mystery writer?
Well, it's actually, I've always wanted to be a writer ever since I was a child, ever since I was 8 years old. And the first time I read The Wind in the Willows, that was the first time I was so immersed in the world of the book and fell in love with the characters. And I was so sad when the book ended that I just decided I had to write my own adventures for Badger and Mole. So I started doing fan fiction as in elementary school before I knew fan fiction was a thing. It was just for me. I didn't write it to show to anybody. I just wrote it because I wanted to stay in that world. So writing has always been something that's been very dear and close to me, just like reading books have been dear and close to me since I was a child. But I made my living in costume design, and I came to that in college when I took a costume design course. I was very interested in theater. I thought I was going to be an English major, but I got drawn into theater because I loved it and because all the fun people were in the theater department. I had a very inspiring, it's one of my very first professional mentors, a very inspiring costuming professor who just encouraged me. And, we all loved her. She was a wonderful teacher. And she was really the person who made me think. I didn't even know costume design was a real job. And it combined so many of my natural interests. I was always interested in history and art and, of course, theater and storytelling. So it just combined all those elements. And so after college, I went to New York City and I started, I got a degree in fashion design from FIT. But then I wanted to go back into theater, which is, I'm going to get to the transitioning part soon. But that's what really drew me into costume design in the first place, because whereas fashion is about designing the taste of the marketplace, costume design is about using clothing to help tell a story about a particular set of characters in a particular situation at a particular point in time. So it's all about character and story.
Which is so fascinating. I have a series, my Harlow Cassidy dressmaking series, little magical series.
I love Pleading for Mercy.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I
No,
love that
it's
series too.
charming. It's a lovely series.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, and it's super fun to write. I love the history also. So I always bring in history. I always bring in strong female relationships. These are the things that sort of make me tick, right? And the clothing, though, plays such a big part of each story. What is she making? How is she putting it together? How does that impact the plot? And I knew I wanted to do an apron, have her make aprons, which is so pedestrian for a fashion designer. But I'm like, she lives in small town Texas. She's got to make aprons. And so I crafted the plot around that idea. So I do have that question for you. I know this is your first book and you're working on your second, but how much does the clothing that you want to talk about influence your plot, or do you see that influencing your plots in the future?
That's such an interesting question. Well, because my main character is a key costumer, that's her job,
Right.
and so her job is about clothing, about making film. So I don't know that the clothing influences the plot so much, but it's certainly a key element, always.
The type of movie that you choose. Yeah.
Oh, well, thank you. That's a very good point, because I chose to set this first book in the middle of a big superhero movie.
Right.
And I did that for a couple of reasons. One, that's so much of what Hollywood puts out these days. A-list, your A-list product is largely going to be that comic book superhero genre of film. Unfortunately, whatever.
Yeah.
So that was part of it. Also, because there's a lot of money that goes into those productions. There's lots of technical bells and whistles, and there's just a lot of opportunity for action,
Mm-hmm.
backstage, behind the scenes. And then it gave me also the opportunity to whine just a little bit that, as someone who started out, back in the 90s in film and loved doing period movies. I worked on Forrest Gump and Apollo 13 and The Curious Case of Benjamin Button. And I love period clothing. I love doing fantasy and period movies most of all. But the last 10 years of my Hollywood career, I mostly did comic book and superhero movies because, I was in that sort of, that level of filmmaking. And those are the movies that had all the money to spend. And that's just a fact about film.
Yeah.
You can make a good film with not much money, but it's really hard to make a film that looks beautiful production wise with very little money.
I heard Gwyneth Paltrow, or I read something that she said a while back. She doesn't, really make movies anymore. I don't know if Iron Man was her last sort of thing in Hollywood, but she referenced Shakespeare in Love, and she just said, Hollywood doesn't make those kind of movies anymore, and those are the movies that I would want to make. And I hadn't really thought about it. It's been this transition, so you don't really realize how few of those character-driven, interesting movies are not being made anymore.
That's right. That's right. It's real. And it started happening. I noticed it. I noticed it as early as the early 2000s. I think the first X-Men movie came out in something like 2004. And then after that, the Iron Man, and then the 8 million different Spider-Man franchises,
yes, right.
and, all the Avengers and all that. And I noticed an article this past week that said the top 20 superhero movies of 2023. And I thought, oh my gosh, how did we get here?
Yeah.
Top 20?
No, give me more Seabiscuit. Give me more, I don't know, Butch Cassidy.
Exactly.
That's what I want.
Exactly. So anyway, I'm old fashioned, I'm old school. And so that's another reason I tried to whine in a good natured way, but that was part of the choice of the superhero movie too. The book I'm doing next, which is called Starstruck, which is coming out on May 7th of next year, is she's working on a movie that's set in the 1930s, in the glamour in Hollywood in the 1930s. So it's very glamorous and very, all of that. Yeah, all of that wonderful 30s clothing, which is one of my favorite periods.
Oh, that's going to be great. I'm excited to read that.
So you're right. So that the clothing did influence the plot on that, because I chose to have her doing that kind of movie specifically so I could write about those clothes a little bit.
Okay, that's interesting.
So thank you. Very good question.
So we kind of got derailed on your origin story there. So how did you transition to, so you've always been this storyteller in one way or another, even with the fashion design, costume design. So how did the actual writing of the mystery come about?
Thank you. So I never tried to make my living at writing, but I've written for my entire life, just not fan fiction anymore, but I wrote just for my own creative fulfillment. I knew I'd want to write a murder mystery because that's what I ended up reading all the time. It was the only thing, reading a good murder mystery at the end of a workday was the only thing that could shut off my brain from the workday. Mm-hmm. So in the mid 90s, even though I'd read Nancy Drew and Hardy Boys and all of that stuff when I was a kid, from the mid 90s on, it was strict murder mysteries all the way for me.
Yeah.
So I knew I wanted to write one. And then I started going to a couple of conferences, and I had actually at this point written a murder mystery sort of set in the film industry, not completely, but tangentially. And I paid the $50 to have a publishing professional critique my work. It just happened that I got an agent who critiqued my work. She said, "Do you have a completed manuscript?" And I said, "Yes, I do." And she said, "Well, if you want to, why don't you send it to me? And if it's as promising as these pages, then we can talk about representation."
If you want to,
so
right?
I'm like dumbstruck. Yeah. Okay. So I got it. I got, her name is Anne Collette, and that was just like a gift from the universe.
Yeah, I think you dedicated Final Cut to her, right? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. She has been, she's been absolutely wonderful in every way. She's guided me, taught me, and, finally, when we were ready with this one, and she's the one who convinced me to finally write a murder mystery that was set in the film industry.
Okay.
So I'm going to get back to the question again, the transition, because it actually has felt like a really natural transition to writing. That's sort of why I put in that I've always written, because because what I did as a costume designer was, for me, mostly about storytelling, even though I love the clothes and love the fabrics and all of that too. And what has been interesting to me is that my day job, the filmmaking actually influenced my writing in ways that I wouldn't have expected. Because,
how so?
so go,
Yeah.
no, go.
Well, so go ahead. How so? That's really interesting. I want to hear more.
Because I realized when I was, actually it was when I was writing Final Cut that it finally dawned on me that breaking down all the screenplays to chart the costume changes and then watching the movies being made shot by shot on set every day taught me a lot about story structure.
Mm-hmm.
And so now I think of my writing more cinematically. And I'm an outliner. I always outline all my books before I start writing them, even though I will deviate from the outlines, when I get into it, if it seems like that's where the story or characters are going. But that outline for me is like the daily shot list of camera setups in a movie.
Mm-hmm.
And when I'm writing, I always have the movie version playing in my head.
I guess movie makers can't really pants it, can they?
Well, you'd think not, but you'd be surprised. That's I won't even, back in the studio days, they would write the screenplay, design all the costumes, build all the sets, do the camera and makeup tests, and then they'd shoot the movie. That has gone by the wayside long ago. But I will say, I have never, I've seen some bad movies made from good screenplays, but I've never seen a good movie made from a bad screenplay or made, on the fly,
Mm-hmm.
just like with it, which, there are some movies I could name that you might be surprised that they just like sort of
Winged it.
winged a lot of the action, particularly, which is also disturbing. But yeah.
All right. So let's move into our topic of the day, which is taking your day job and, really using that in your book, which we've started to talk about already. So I recently read Romantic Comedy by Curtis Sittenfeld, and I had a similar reaction. That one is set on the set of late night TV, like Saturday Night Live. And, you get this really detailed behind the scenes look of what it's like. It kind of takes the mystique out of it, right? It takes the magic out of it because you see how it all progresses. And I mean, it was just so cool and so interesting. And to kind of get the same behind the scenes look at how movies are made and, second assistant directors and all of these things that you don't even know exist or are part of it. You see the credits. One of my sons makes music for movies. He works in a studio in North Hollywood, and so we get to see the musical side of that, but not sort of the behind the scenes. Yeah. So that was just so fascinating. So is it the fascination of that day job that and that being just kind of like what and have done for so long that influenced how you wrote this book and setting, and the concept behind it? Or, what was the catalyst, I guess, or was there not even any thought to it because you're just like, yeah, this is what I have to write?
Yes. I resisted writing a book set in the direct middle of the film industry because I thought I was still too close to it after because I'm very grateful for the experience. It was really wonderful, but it's pretty intense sometimes. And when I retired, I was like, I want to be done with that for a while.
Mm-hmm.
I want some distance from that. But Anne was like, so actually, she let me write. She let me write a murder mystery that wasn't set directly in the film industry. She was really advocated for it, took it out to publishers. We got some big pile of really polite rejection letters. And then she said to me, okay, you want to sell a book? Write what you know, set it in the middle of the film industry. Because she said, every time I talk to you about, the industry, she said, I think it's really interesting. And I think readers will think it's really interesting too. So
I think it's so interesting. It was when I listened to your talk with Victoria Gilbert at Flyleaf, and I found it so fascinating. And I think I went up to you right then and there, and I was like, "Be on my podcast, please," because it's so interesting. You just, again, it's that behind the scenes of this thing that we don't usually get to peek at, and I love that.
Thanks. That's very kind. Yeah, and you're right. It's what I did for 30 years. So yeah, I mean, it's really, I've done all the research, right? So it was, and I used almost everything in the book. I mean, Marcus Prey is the sleazy producer director who's a sexual predator, and
Right. I got a big
the
question
main,
about him.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. He is a composite of different people, and he's not even an exaggeration, although not everybody is, everybody is a complete person. Marcus Prey in the book does, you don't get to see his whole, persona, but the experience of him is very much an experience I have had with different directors and producers. Although I will say there are many, many more people who are collaborative and good to work with than there are people like Marcus Prey. But there are people like Marcus Prey in the film industry. But almost everything that happened was based on something that I witnessed or had happened to me. And all of Joey's interactions with celebrities were interactions that I'd had, because I've had people ask me, well, did you have to get anybody's permission to use their name in the book? And I'm like, well, maybe I should have, but I didn't, because, all those names that I used, I was on the other end of that conversation, experience, whatever. So I felt like, it's something that happened to me, so I can use it, right?
Right.
Because I know it's real.
Yeah.
So
interesting.
And there's only and Marcus Prey, like I said, he is a pseudonym and a stand-in for people that I haven't named. So, and most everybody, all the celebrity interactions I sprinkled in are really mostly, complimentary. They aren't anything that cast aspersions on anybody's character.
So how did you come up with the name Marcus Prey? Obviously, it's a fabulous name, and so conjures up images just by hearing it. Did you know right away that was what you were going to name him Prey as a surname? Or
not exactly, but it is very close to the name of one of his real life prototypes.
Oh, okay. Well, so, I just think of, he's this person preying on other people,
exactly. Well, actually, I came up with the prey before I thought of the, prey. But when that occurred to me, I was like, oh, well, that's perfect.
Yeah. Interesting. So let's talk about Joey Jessop and how, so we know that this book is greatly influenced by your career and the breadth of knowledge that you have that is just so internalized, it's just part of you. How much of Joey is you? And was that, how does she come into this career? Does that all mirror your path, or did you work hard to separate yourself from your protagonist?
Yeah, she does not come in, because she started out, as many people do in the industry, in her late teens. So, I don't say anything about her education or anything like that. In my mind, she had a couple of years of community college before she started in the industry, but it's something that, she was drawn to, and she is very artistic. I mean, she paints in watercolors, or did before, the industry completely, soaked up all her time.
Yeah.
So she came into it. I mean, I didn't start in film until I was past 30. So she started more when she was like 19, 20, 20. Because she's 35 in this, in Final Cut, and she's been in the industry for 15 years. So no, that way, and I did want it to be different. And she comes from her father died in Desert Storm, right after she was born. So she never knew her father. She adores her mother. I come from a family of 4 kids and, 2-parent home. And I just, I tried to make her history different from mine because I didn't want her, although, inevitably, because we have the same job, we have the same skill set, we have the same outlook on the industry, because it's just too good an opportunity to talk about that. And, and how can I talk about an industry I worked in for 30 years without, I have nothing to use but my point of view.
Right. I have 4 series with 4 different sleuths, each, unique in their own way, but each one is like me in some way also. My very first character was Lola Cruz. She's a Latina PI, very much. Her family is very much based on my husband's family, who's a first-generation Mexican-American. And, just I really wanted to celebrate the culture and the food and the music and, their relationship and all of this stuff. And I always have said that Lola is my alter ego if I were younger, Latina, and a PI, and sexier. But as I said earlier, all of my books have certain themes in them. They have these strong female relationships. They all have murder because I'm like you. That's what I gravitate towards with my reading for the most part. They all have, sort of the central themes that are meaningful to me. And so, as you said, you can't help but infuse your protagonist or protagonists with some of those traits or beliefs or value systems, because they're part of us. They really are part of us. It's easier to make your supporting characters divergent, but your
Yes.
sleuths, they're the ones we're rooting for, and so they are, I think, very much part of us.
I think it's inevitable. Mm-hmm. And so why not embrace it? Mm-hmm. And I'm with you. I need something in the book to hang on to in terms of, I don't want to say moral, I just want to say some sort of meaningful issue, mm-hmm. That is in it either central or very important to the story. Mm-hmm. Which, in this case, well, there are a couple of things. I mean, the 2 things that were most important to me, whether they, came through complete. I mean, obviously, I think the Me Too situation was central to the book, but also the mentoring part. Like, Joey has a very close relationship with a production assistant who's a young costumer who, looks up to her and is very talented and wants to make his way in the film industry. And she sort of sees herself in him. And it's important to her to nurture young talent like that. And I wanted to make that sort of a balancing point to the sexual predation, which is unfortunately still an element that exists within the film industry. It's just part of the culture that is very slow to change. But the mentoring part is very important in costuming, especially. And I think in most elements, in most crafts within the industry, like props, camera, you see people mentoring the younger people, because the fact of the matter is there's really no way to learn how to make a movie except to be on a movie. Mm-hmm. Because you can't, even in the best film schools, they do a pretty good job at places like UCLA and USC is what I really meant, but UCLA too. And NYU, but it's really hard to learn. You can't learn what a big movie, Hollywood professional, big movie set is like until you're on one. You just can't replicate that experience in a classroom or a lab or anything like that. Mm-hmm. So people have to learn on the job. So it's important that the people who've been doing it take the time. There are no training programs for this stuff. So it's important to train the people who are working with you so that there's going to be some continuity of professionalism and skill within the industry. And because there are hundreds of people working on a big Hollywood movie, that there could be 500 people in the crew easily. And so your community, your coworkers are very important to your everyday working experience. Nobody makes a movie on their own. Nobody designs a movie on their own. There's a whole team of people that need to work together. So just the basic level of camaraderie, collaboration, skill, so that you can rely on the people you're working with, and they can rely on you. It's just a craft that's very interdependent, and so community is key. And anyway, so that I wanted to emphasize that in the book.
Given how vast those communities are working on a film, obviously you had to really rein it in, still capture sort of the overall experience and, give the reader a feeling of that sort of broad experience. But in terms of Joey's immediate community, how did you choose the characters that were going to be significant in her life and in her community when you had such a vast pool to pull from?
Right. Well, I went back to, the tried and true, what was my day like on a film? Mm-hmm. So, and then I chose characters, and in every one of the characters is based either on, like Mallow, the production assistant, is based on any number of both male and female young costumers I've worked with over the years who just were like so inspirational in and of themselves, because they loved they had a love for the work and an excitement about the industry. And after you've been doing it for 25 years or so, and maybe you get on a job that is a little bit more pressurized or draining, it's sometimes hard to, reconnect with that enthusiasm. And having kids around like that are just like, give you an extra excitement about what you're doing, and excitement seeing them blossom. So Mallow was
reignites your own passion.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. In fact, in the last few years of the industry, the industry is in major transition right now, even more so than, 5 years ago, 6 years ago when I left. Major transition. That's just the nature of the beast. But in the last 10 and especially 5 or 6 years of the industry, I was just like, I'm not even recognizing this business very much anymore. I mean, it's changed so vastly from when I started out. And I just was like, there's nothing to do but accept it and look for what you can connect with. And the thing that really kept me going those last years was that I decided I was just going to be there for the people in my department, that, that was going to be my reason for coming to work every day. And, and yes, the job, but, I really did get a little tired of, spandex, superhero suits and, armor and all, it's fine. It just wasn't my thing. So, and
Is that primarily what you mean when you say the industry's changing so much that we're going away from those character-driven, slower-paced movies and more into, all of the Barbie and the superhero and things like that, these bigger blockbusters, or are there other ways that it's changing?
okay. If I start going off too much, just like
Okay.
say, okay, because this is like one of my, um, the industry started changing. Yeah, like at least 20 years ago in terms of, and it happened before this, but I really started seeing the impact of it about 20 years ago. Um, the studios are all run by corporations now, and there's very little creative power left or freedom left within the real filmmakers' hands. I mean, there are still a few of them out there. Ron Howard, I mean, Clint Eastwood, God bless him, he's still hanging on, and Barry Levinson, Martin Scorsese, but mostly the younger Quentin Tarantino. I don't particularly like his work, but I realize he's a genius. And he's a true film historian, and he loves the industry. And he is a real filmmaker. But mostly, it's these corporate types who don't have enough creative vision to understand that everybody wants a story to be told. All they can understand, and this is not even a criticism against them personally. Bless you. Um, they don't understand the product they're making. They don't know how to make films. They don't know why they work or why they don't work, and they don't trust the people who do know, like Scorsese, like the filmmakers who are coming up, who have the kind of vision that Scorsese does. They won't trust those people. All they can see is what's worked at the box office before, and that's why we get a million different sequels. There's another reason too, which I mention in the book, which is around 2008, around the crash, the market also fell out from under the DVD, and that was a third of the studio's income. So they needed to look for emerging markets where they could really rake in, replace that income. And a lot of the West is saturated in terms of what they can really further, how they can expand. So they're looking to expand into China and India, and where there's a lot but the language barrier, the cultural barriers preclude doing something like A Curious Case of Benjamin Button, whereas the Avengers, they're immediately recognizable as characters. There's mostly action. There's no complicated dialogue or cultural humor or, even character that you have to like. There just isn't any subtlety. It is what it is, and that's the product. And so there are a lot of reasons it's changing. But
So you chose the superhero movie. We talked about that a bit, and then you mentioned the next book is based on a 1930s film. So how do you deal with that film being made, given the climate of filmmaking today? Is there kind of this, separation of reality versus what you're creating in fiction? Like, would the movie that you are writing about next be made today?
it could be, but it would need. Actually, I've got to be honest. I based it on The Aviator, which is a movie I also worked on, and it could be made today. I mean, it would be like Oppenheimer, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
It would be that level of A-list movie, that same sort of period. So it could be made today. It would be like maybe the only movie that's being made in Hollywood like that, but it could be still.
Yeah.
And I don't attach anybody real to it, but I attach two actors who are supposedly like, two of the biggest stars working in the industry. So to justify the fact that it is being made, and it's being made in Hollywood.
Yeah. Well, yeah, if you look at Oppenheimer and the cast for that tells you why it was able to be made, and why they had the money behind it, not only to make it but to market it as well, especially when it comes
Exactly.
out against Barbie,
I
which
love
I
both of
actually
them.
loved so much.
I did too. I did too.
Yeah.
Well, it was very smart.
This episode of the WriterSpark Podcast is brought to you by WriterSpark Academy's Field Guide to Writing a Cozy Mystery. Are you a fan of cozy mystery novels? Have you always wanted to try your hand at writing one yourself? Look no further. WriterSpark Academy's Field Guide to Writing a Cozy Mystery Masterclass is the ultimate course for aspiring cozy mystery authors. With its 10 comprehensive modules, 28 engaging video lessons, and a variety of hands-on activities, this course will guide you through every step of crafting your very own captivating, cozy mystery. From developing a captivating hook and setting that will transport readers to a charming and mysterious world, to creating a lovable sleuth who will keep readers hooked until the very end, this course covers it all. Make sure to look in the show notes if you're interested in checking out this course and unlock your potential as a cozy mystery author. I do have another question. When you're writing about something that's so personal to you and so much a part of you, your career, what you've spent your life doing, what are the sort of pitfalls or the obstacles that you faced, aside from what you already mentioned about needing to create some distance from this world that you already were so immersed in, you didn't want to necessarily write about that. So aside from that, are there other pitfalls or obstacles that aspiring writers, people who are listening to us, people who want to write about their real life in a fictionalized way might want to consider?
That's such a great question. Yes, there are, and some of them are that there were some, like that scene, the scene in chapter 2 when the actress is being humiliated in front of the entire company by the director. That was so difficult to write, and it really, I can't tell you I don't even know how many times I rewrote it, because and with coaching from Anne and my editor, when we got to the point of publication, it was hard to hit a balance between, because at one point they both said, he's so awful. You have to, and it, two things. He's so awful, and you've got to show more of her interior reactions to that. But when they said he's so awful, you need to temper that a little bit, and he's so awful, you need to show her reactions, and that both of those things were difficult, because like a lot of that dialogue was just, it was just typing on my part. It wasn't like making anything up. It was just like stuff I'd seen. And
it's kind of like, I can see your agent and your editor's point in the sense that, do we believe that these things really happened? They're so extreme. Is it hyperbolic? And that it's true, but in truth being stranger than fiction and all of that, but we have to create it so it's accessible for the reader, right? To believe it.
Exactly. When they said that, I did understand that. And it was still a challenge for me, because I was so emotionally, enmeshed in it, which was part of the reason that I was hesitant to go there in the first place. And I didn't have to write about that aspect of the film industry, but it's something that's really important to me and really affected my career and a lot of other people's careers too. And I'm not saying that I don't feel sorry for myself in any way. I was incredibly lucky, and I am grateful for my years in film. But that is a fact, that it was a dynamic that was there every day. And one thing I wanted to do with that was to, turn it on its ear a little bit and explore how, if you're in the middle of that situation, what can you do and what should you do? And at least you should be thinking about it. What can you do to change it? Even if you feel like you're powerless. you at
because of the
least have to be.
built-in power dynamic in that industry and in other industries. In a way,
Right.
you're empowering or showing people how they can respond, even if they're in a different situation or a different industry. You're setting up something that we can learn from, right? Hopefully.
Right, exactly. Which is why I had her, especially at the end, really worry about the ways that she, went along with or enabled the director, even if, her only choice in the matter, which is really the case, is to say, no, I won't do that. Okay, you're fired.
Right.
Um, because especially in film, there's no human resources.
Mm-hmm.
Every film is its own microcosm of freelance employees who come together for a very short period of time to do a specific project. So
Mm-hmm.
even though it may be under the auspices of the studio, that studio really has no day-to-day involvement. They have complete control over, budget and what's being done creatively, but they have no say about the day-to-day operation of, interactions with the employees among themselves. It's very much a military, and it has to be this way in lots of ways because there's so many people and there has to be a chain of command or things will degenerate into chaos immediately. So there's a definite chain of command.
So that you brought up a question for me, though. Given the fact that every film is its own microcosm, community, how are you dealing with that with Joey and the next book? Because we don't have the same. Does she have the same, small group of community that's going to be on the next film that she works on as well? And is that sort of creative license because that doesn't actually happen?
There are certain people who show up in the next one, and what will happen once you've been working for a while is that you'll get on a movie, and maybe you'll have the ability to recommend other people, or you. I mean, that often happens, or you're working at, like Clint Eastwood, for example, always has the same people working.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you, there are just opportunities. It doesn't always happen, but and certainly you can end up on a film where you know hardly anybody. Although the longer you work in film, the rarer that is, because even though it's a big community of people, it's really smaller than it seems, especially within the different crafts. So anyway, she does have the same supervisor. Bill Nichols is on it, and she brings on the same Zephyr Tomomatsu, the principal costumer. And then she has reason to contact Maggie Fuller, who is the investigative reporter, who, she was sort of frenemies with during Final Cut, and she has reason to tap her for some insight in this next one.
Okay, so you find a way to
but
make it work.
Right.
Okay.
So there are new people, certainly, but not everybody's completely unfamiliar.
Yeah. Okay. Because that's part of the little cozy mystery genre is that you have this tight knit community, right? That goes from one book to the next, to the next, to the next. You always have to introduce new characters because somebody has to get killed off that isn't, beloved. So, it's finding a balance between that. But it seems to me that this is a little trickier if you want to stay really true to how it is in the industry. But you can also take
Right.
creative license. So, I mean, we are murdering people over and over. So there is some creative license there.
Yeah. And I do introduce a couple of characters in this new one that if I'm lucky enough to continue with the series, I think they're going to be like with her forever. So,
yeah.
And one of them is a dog.
Oh, yes, we love our dogs, don't we? And our cats.
Yeah.
All right, y'all. So Final Cut, first book in the Hollywood Mystery by Marjorie McCown. Thank you so much for being here. This was fascinating. I love talking with you. It's been
I
so
love talking
interesting.
with you. Thank you.
Well, thank you. And Marjorie, you have a special gift for a listener. Can we talk about that for a sec?
Yes, thank you. I would love to give a signed copy of Final Cut, send a copy of Final Cut to one of your listeners.
That is great. See, I have one right here signed. I will have the information in the show notes for people to fill out their entry. And then a week from the release of this podcast, a winner will be chosen and contacted. So everybody look in the show notes right at the top for that link to the form to fill out an entry for a chance to win a signed copy by Marjorie McCown of Final Cut. Thank you so much for
Thank
offering that
you.
to the readers. Thanks
Thank
again for
you.
being here. Best of luck with this series. And whenever, I'm sorry, what was the next one called?
Starstruck.
Starstruck. Whenever that comes out, I would love to talk again, find another topic.
Oh, I would love that.
Inspiring authors, we can talk forever, right? And inspire people, hopefully.
Hopefully, yes.
Yes. Okay. So again, thanks for being here so much.
Thank you, Melissa. This has been really fun.
Thank you so much for listening and spending your time with me today, everyone. I'm Melissa Bourbon, and this is the WriterSpark Podcast. Take a moment to visit our website at www.writersparkacademy.com. Check out our courses, our resources, and all the content there. And I will see you next time. Until then, happy writing.